Hey, what's up guys? I'm KBHD here, and today we're going to be talking about Ubuntu Phone. Now, a lot of people have been asking me to do a video on Ubuntu Phone as it's kind of come into its broadest light recently. It's been very popular. It was at CES where a lot of people got their first hands-on and first impressions of it, but basically it's a really new thing, so let's go ahead and talk about it. What is it? Well, first of all, it's an operating system. Ubuntu Phone is the name, just like we see Windows Phone on all Windows Phone phones. We see iOS on every iPhone. We see Android on a ton of phones. So Ubuntu Phone is a new operating system that will run on other phones. Now, what devices and phones will it run on? Well, that's a good question because it's not completely answered yet, but in all the demos we've seen and all the videos at CES and everything, it's running on a Samsung Galaxy Nexus, which is Google's last generation development phone. Not to say it's an old or a bad phone, but it's 1-year-old hardware. Now, according to Jono Bacon, who is a community manager over there for Ubuntu, there are 3 possible ways that this could work. Number 1 is that there will be phones like the Galaxy Nexus that currently run Android. They will be able to run Ubuntu Phone. So just nothing but Ubuntu Phone, just the plain operating system, and that will be the only OS that they run. Not the iPhone, not the Blackberries, not Windows Phone, just phones that are capable of running Android will be capable of running just Ubuntu Phone. Option number 2 is something I'd like to see is higher end phones with, quad-core processors and extra RAM. These Android phones would run Android in your pocket, but then when you hook them up to a dock and a desktop, maybe a display, you'll be able to run a full version of desktop Ubuntu Linux. So it's an Android phone in your pocket, but it's also a desktop PC when you hook it up to a dock and a keyboard and a display. And the third way is certain devices will be able to run Ubuntu Phone in your pocket and be able to dock and run the full version of Ubuntu on your desktop with terminal and everything. So if you're ready for that, that's definitely going to be the full complete experience, and I think that's what they're going to be aiming for. But I definitely like option number 2 with a high-end Android phone being able to dock and suddenly run Ubuntu on the desktop. And also an unofficial prediction for me, I kind of have a feeling we're going to be seeing this on tablets soon as well this year, just because of how thumb-friendly the OS is, but we'll get to that in a second. You should also know that Ubuntu Phone is an open-source operating system, the same way Android is, and what that means for Android is that manufacturers can come in and spin it however they want and then output that. And it'll be different variations of Android in the end. Same thing will probably be possible with Ubuntu Phone. There will be different spins of it, different variations of it, or maybe just certain customizations that developers will be able to add. Maybe you want a lock screen to look a certain way, or you'll be able to change things basically the same way you can with Android. So what makes this different from Android? Well, the biggest difference I see with Android is the user interface. The user interface is really clean, really simple, but it's also got a little bit of a learning curve to it. It doesn't use any actual buttons, no capacitive or software buttons. The only buttons that you use are the actual power and volume buttons on the phone. The hands-on demos with it haven't been super smooth. We've seen a lot of frame stuttering and things like that, but again, this is very alpha. This is way pre-release, and I have a certain feeling that this is going to be as smooth as anything else out there when it hits market. Also, something notable about it is that there's no central home location or home button. There's home screens, but there's no home button that you can stamp and go home. The same way you see on Android, there's a home button, you can go home. On iOS, there's always a physical circular home button that you can go home. Even on Windows Phone, you have a certain button you press to go home. That doesn't exist on Ubuntu Phone. So if you're familiar with Ubuntu and Linux, you probably won't have a problem with this, but you should note that it's going to have a little bit of a learning curve. So without any further ado, here are my top 5 features of Ubuntu Phone, starting with number 5, and that's the color scheme. Now this might seem minor. A lot of people are like, oh, the color scheme, that's nice. But a lot of people who are already using Ubuntu or Linux on their desktops are familiar with that orange, and it's a good looking color scheme, I have to admit. And, running on black phones, so it's a black bezel with the orange wallpapers. I don't know, it just looks pretty good. I thought it was notable. Number 4 is the built-in apps. And they were doing a lot of these at the demo at CES that I got to look at. And especially things like the gallery app, it just looks really, it looks clean. It looks intuitive. But again, it's different. So you're going to have to learn it. But I think the built-in apps were noteworthy, especially things like the gallery app, which just struck me as being different. The number 3 feature is multitasking, and this is done really well. Very similar, in fact, to Chrome for Android. When you swipe in from the right-hand side, you'll be able to swipe between your open applications. So you'll cycle through those by swiping in from the right-hand side of the display. It looked pretty smooth. Again, not as smooth as probably the final release, but it did look pretty good. And but this is slightly incomplete, I feel like, because there was no real way to close open things. Just like in Chrome for Android, you can close your existing tabs. But when you switch between these, you don't really have a way to close open applications. You can just cycle between the ones that are open. So it's nice the way it works, but I think when it's complete, it'll have a way to close apps. So that's pretty cool. And that brings us to number 2. The number 2 feature is just the overall gesture-based UI. So I said there are no real buttons involved, only the power and volume buttons. So the way you get around this is using the swipes from the top, bottom, and left and right edges of your display. Swipe in from the bottom and that'll bring you to your menu. That's a contextual menu, so if you're in the gallery and you swipe in from the bottom, you might get a share menu to be able to share that photo or edit that photo or video that you're looking at. If you swipe in from the right, that's where you get your multitasking, so you'll be able to cycle between open applications. And swipe in from the left, and that's where you get basically your app launcher. So swiping in from the left here will allow you to scroll up and down and open whatever app you have, Facebook, camera, gallery, browser, whatever you want. And you'll be able to open this just from the launcher on the left-hand side. That launcher on the left will also be able to bring you to the desktop, one of the essentially home screens on Ubuntu Phone. And on the top, that brings us to our number 1. That is your settings toggles, which are brilliant. The settings toggles in Ubuntu Phone give you really, really fast, but also really quick and intuitive access to your settings. Basically, you swipe down from the top, and then before you go all the way down, you swipe to the left or to the right to pick the setting you want to adjust, and then swipe all the way down to get access to it. So it's very, very specific, gives you a lot of control, and a lot more options actually than the quick Android 4.2 settings. Pretty much every other OS is really far behind in terms of quick settings toggles and controls, so right above Android, I would put Ubuntu Phone's quick settings toggles. They are good looking, they are fast, and they are smooth, and they are really useful, so I like that. That's my number 1 feature. So there you go, guys. That's the new player in the market. Ubuntu Phone should be coming out on some unknown range of devices later this year. What do you guys think about it? I mean, I personally think I want to try this. I'm not one to really play around with a ton of different operating systems. I've stuck to maybe 3 total on my phones. Windows Phone, Android, and iOS, but I don't know. I think I would give this a try this year, considering whatever devices it runs on, especially if it uses that second option where it can be maybe Android in your pocket and then Ubuntu on the desktop. That seems cool. So either way, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up below or a +1, or if you learned something, feel free to reshare it. It definitely helps out a lot with the channel. Either way, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.